Dear listeners, a new day and a new story to discuss. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that interests me. Listen and write down what you think about this situation. I'm interested in your opinions. 2 months ago, my world, a seemingly stable edifice, was quietly teetering on the brink of an invisible precipice. I'm Samuel, a 48-year-old father, ensconced in the routine comfort of middle age, my life revolving around my family. Sarah, my wife of 25 years, a vibrant woman of 45, has been my rock. Together, we've raised three spirited children: Alex, 23, Brian, 21, and our youngest, Emily, who just turned 19. Sam, have you seen Emily's new Instagram post? Sarah would often ask, her voice tinged with a mix of amusement and maternal pride. I just grunt in response, my interest in social media as scant as my knowledge of quantum physics. Emily, my little girl, once a daddy's girl, had transformed into a young woman right before my eyes, her world one I was increasingly alien to. Morning, Dad. Emily's cheerful voice would break my reverie most mornings. Guess what? I got 100 likes on my photo within an hour. Her excitement over such trivialities often baffled me, but I'd play along, mustering a smile and a feigned interest. Is that so? Well, that's impressive, I'd respond, trying to sound enthusiastic. Sarah and Emily's bond had grown stronger over the years, especially as Emily navigated the complex waters of late teenage life. They'd often sit together, lost in conversations about boys, fashion, and those damn social media trends. Samuel, times are changing. You need to keep up, Sarah would often chide me gently. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I found myself sitting on the porch, reminiscing. You know, Emily's almost an adult now, Sarah said, joining me with 2 cups of coffee. She's not our little girl anymore. I sighed, the weight of her words sinking in. I know, Sarah. It's just hard to let go, you know? I still remember the first time I held her in my arms. My voice trailed off, lost in memories. We did good, Sam. Our kids are turning out just fine, she said, squeezing my hand. I chuckled. Alex and Brian, maybe. But Emily? She's becoming a mystery to me. Sarah laughed softly. That's just her growing up. She talks to me about things she can't discuss with you. It's normal. I nodded, though a part of me felt a pang of loss. The father-daughter bond one once cherished was evolving, slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. One evening, our quiet family life was jolted. Emily walked in, her eyes alight with excitement. Mom, Dad, I've got something to tell you. What is it, sweetheart? Sarah asked, her eyes reflecting Emily's excitement. I've been selected for the student exchange program. It's in France. Emily's words tumbled out in a rush of enthusiasm. I felt a surge of pride, but it was quickly overshadowed by concern. France? That's a big step, Emily. But Dad, it's a great opportunity. Think of all I'll learn, Emily pleaded, her eyes seeking my approval. Sarah looked at me, her expression a mixture of excitement for Emily and concern for my reaction. Sam, this is good for her. She'll grow so much from this experience. I knew they were right, but the protective father in me balked at the thought of my little girl so far away, in a land I knew nothing about. I need some time to think about this, I said finally, feeling the weight of a father's love and fear. As the days turned into weeks, our family dynamics continued to evolve, each of us playing our parts in the delicate dance of family life, unaware of the storm that was brewing just beyond the horizon. My role as a father was changing, and I grappled with this new reality, where guidance often collided with the need to let go. The once clear lines of parenting were blurring, leaving me in uncharted waters. Sam, you're overthinking this. Emily is smart and capable. She'll be fine in France, Sarah reassured me one night as we lay in bed, the darkness enveloping our whispers. It's hard, you know? She's still my little girl, I admitted, my voice heavy with unspoken fears. Sarah turned to face me, her hand finding mine in the dark. She'll always be your little girl, Sam. But she's also growing up. We need to trust her. I knew she was right, but the father in me struggled. The thought of Emily, so far away, in a different culture, navigating life on her own terms, was daunting. The next morning, over breakfast, the topic resurfaced. Emily, her eyes shining with a mix of determination and hope, said, Dad, I need this. I want to see the world, learn new things. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the little girl I used to hold, but a young woman ready to take on the world. I just worry about you, Em. It's a father's job to worry. Dad, I'll be okay. I promise to call every day, Emily said, her voice earnest. And you'll be careful? I asked, the worry evident in my voice. Super careful. Cross my heart, Emily replied, crossing her heart with her finger, a gesture that tugged at my heartstrings. As the days drew closer to her departure, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. The house was abuzz with preparations, and I watched as Emily packed her life into suitcases, her excitement palpable. Need any help packing, Em? I asked one evening, standing at the doorway of her room. She looked up, surprised. Sure, Dad. Could you help me with these books? As I helped her pack, I realized this was more than just a physical journey for Emily. It was a rite of passage, a step towards her own identity. The night before her flight, the house was quiet, the air thick with unspoken emotions. We had dinner together, a simple meal, punctuated by laughter and occasional silences. After dinner, Emily hugged me tightly. I'm going to miss you, Dad. I hugged her back, holding on a little longer than usual. I'll miss you too, kiddo. Make us proud, okay? I will, Dad. I promise, she said, her voice muffled against my chest. As I lay in bed that night, the house felt emptier, the silence louder. Sarah's steady breathing next to me was a comforting presence in the sea of my thoughts. Sam, it's going to be okay, Sarah whispered, sensing my unrest. I know. It's just, the house is going to be so quiet without her, I replied, my voice tinged with sadness. We'll get through this, Sam. We always do, Sarah said, her hand finding mine in the darkness, a silent vow of enduring support. And so, as the first chapter of this tumultuous journey unfolded, our family stood at the crossroads of change, each of us navigating our own emotions, tied together by the unbreakable bonds of love and the inevitable tensions that come with growth and change. The days following Emily's departure to France were a blur of emotions for me. The house, once filled with her laughter and energy, now echoed with a silence that seemed to amplify my internal turmoil. I, Samuel, found myself standing often at her closed door, half expecting her to burst out with a new story or a request to go shopping. Sam, you need to distract yourself. Why don't you join me at the community center? Sarah suggested one morning, her voice laced with concern. She was adapting better to our daughter's absence, her maternal intuition somehow preparing her for this inevitable parting. I don't know, Sarah. I feel lost, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Come on, it'll do you good. Besides, they need volunteers for the upcoming charity event, she pressed, her hand gently squeezing my shoulder. I reluctantly agreed, more to appease her than out of any real desire. The community center was bustling with activity, a stark contrast to the stillness of our home. As I helped set up the event, my mind kept drifting back to Emily. How's the father-daughter separation going? Joked Mike, a fellow volunteer, as he handed me a stack of flyers. It's tough, Mike. The house feels empty without her, I replied, forcing a smile. You'll get used to it. It's all part of them growing up, he said, patting my back in a show of camaraderie. The event helped distract me, but it was a temporary respite. Returning home, I was greeted by Emily's latest Instagram post from France. The sight of her smiling face, standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, filled me with a mix of pride and longing. Look at her, Sam. She's having the time of her life, Sarah said, pointing at the photo on her phone. I see that. She looks happy, I managed to say, my voice tinged with a hint of sadness. Sarah noticed my mood. Sam, we did well. She's out there, exploring the world because of us. Because of the values we instilled in her. Her words were meant to comfort, but they opened a floodgate of questions within me. Was I too protective of Emily? Had I held her back in any way? These thoughts were still swirling in my head when the phone rang one evening. It was Emily, her voice bubbling with excitement from across the ocean. Dad, you won't believe the places I've seen and the people I've met. Paris is amazing, she exclaimed, her words rushing out in a torrent. I can imagine, Em. Tell me everything, I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face for the first time in days. As Emily recounted her adventures, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. She was more than just okay. She was thriving. But amidst her lively tales, a sense of unease began to gnaw at me. Dad, I met someone, she said hesitantly. His name is Pierre, and he's showing me around Paris. He's really nice. A knot formed in my stomach. A guy? Who is he? Emily. Just a friend, Dad. He's a student here, studying art. He's been really helpful, she replied, her tone casual. I struggled to keep the worry out of my voice. Just be careful, Emily. You know, not everyone has good intentions. Dad, I'm not a kid anymore. I know how to take care of myself, she replied, a hint of frustration creeping into her voice. The conversation lingered on, with Emily assuring me of her safety and independence. As I listened, my mind raced with images of Emily, alone in a foreign city, trusting a stranger. Emily, just promise me you'll be cautious, okay? And call us if you need anything, I said, the fatherly concern unmistakable in my voice. Dad, I promise. I know what I'm doing. And Pierre, he's just a friend, really. He's been here a while and knows the city well. It's nice to have someone show me around, she explained, her voice earnest. I tried to swallow my apprehensions, reminding myself that this was a part of her growing up, a part of her learning to navigate the world on her own terms. All right, Emily, just remember what we've taught you. Use your judgment, I said, my words a mix of caution and trust. I will, Dad. Love you, she said before ending the call. After hanging up, I sat there, lost in thought. Sarah noticed my concern. Sam, what's wrong? You look worried. It's nothing. It's just. Emily met someone in Paris. A guy named Pierre, I admitted, trying to sound nonchalant. Sarah raised her eyebrows. Oh, and that bothers you? It's not that. It's just, she's so far away, and we don't know this guy, I said, my voice reflecting my inner conflict. Sam, she's smart and responsible. We've raised her well. She can handle herself, Sarah reassured me, but her words did little to ease my mind. The following days were a constant battle between my trust in Emily and my instinct to protect her. I found myself checking her social media more frequently, looking for any signs of this Pierre. Sam, you're obsessing over this. You need to let her live her life, Sarah pointed out one evening, catching me scrolling through Emily's Instagram. I know. It's just hard. I can't help but worry, I replied, my eyes still on the screen. Let's talk to her together. Maybe if we get to know more about this Pierre, it'll ease your mind, Sarah suggested. I agreed, and we arranged a video call with Emily. Seeing her face on the screen, her eyes sparkling with excitement as she talked about her adventures, my heart swelled with pride. But when the conversation shifted to Pierre, my apprehension returned. So, tell us about this Pierre, I asked, trying to sound casual. He's really cool, Dad. An art student, very talented. He showed me some amazing places in Paris, Emily said, her face lighting up. And he's just a friend, right? I pressed, unable to keep the concern out of my voice. Dad, yes. We're just friends. He's been really nice, showing me around, introducing me to other students. It's not like that, she reassured us. We talked for a while longer, with Emily sharing more of her experiences. As the call ended, I felt a mix of emotions. Pride in her independence, but an unshakable sense of worry that lingered. That night, as I lay in bed, the house enveloped in silence, I realized that this was just the beginning of a new chapter for Emily and for us as parents. A chapter where the lines between protection and freedom, trust and worry, were blurred. As a father, I had to learn to navigate this new terrain, balancing my instinct to protect with the understanding that Emily was carving her own path in the world. The days melted into weeks, and Emily's absence in the house was like a silent echo, reminding me, Samuel, of the ever-widening gap between my daughter's world and mine. Sarah seemed more at ease, often lost in phone conversations with Emily, laughing and sharing stories I wasn't privy to. One evening, as I sat idly flipping through a magazine, Sarah walked in, her face flushed with excitement. Sam, Emily called. She's coming back for a visit next month, and she's bringing someone with her. My heart skipped a beat. Someone? Do you mean Pierre? No, not Pierre. She's met someone else, a young man from her exchange program. His name's Ethan. She sounded really happy, Sam. Ethan. The name felt like a cold splash of water. I wasn't ready to face the reality of Emily being in a serious relationship. What do we know about this Ethan? I asked, trying to mask my concern. Sarah shrugged. Not much, just that he's studying international relations and loves photography. Emily's smitten, Sam. She's really excited for us to meet him. The weeks leading up to Emily's visit were a whirlwind of emotions. I busied myself with work, trying to quell the rising tide of worry and protectiveness. Sarah, on the other hand, seemed to relish the preparation, planning meals and outings for Emily and Ethan's visit. The day of their arrival, the house was abuzz with anticipation. Sarah flitted around, adjusting cushions and checking on the dinner she had prepared. I stood in Emily's room, now pristine and guest-ready, feeling a strange sense of intrusion. The sound of a car pulling up jolted me from my reverie. They were here? My heart pounded as I walked to the door, Sarah right beside me, her hand squeezing mine reassuringly. Emily burst through the door, radiant and beautiful, pulling us into a tight hug. "Mom, Dad, I've missed you so much," she exclaimed, her eyes shining with joy. And then there was Ethan. He stood a little behind Emily, tall and confident, with a warm smile that seemed to light up the room. "Mr. and Mrs. Roberts, it's a pleasure to meet you. Emily has told me so much about you," he said, extending his hand. The dinner was a mix of laughter and stories, with Emily and Ethan sharing tales of their adventures abroad. I observed Ethan, trying to gauge his intentions, his character. He was polite, articulate, and seemed genuinely fond of Emily. Later that night, as Sarah and I lay in bed, she turned to me, a soft smile on her face. "So, what do you think of Ethan? He seems like a decent young man. But it's hard, Sarah. It's hard seeing Emily with someone else, knowing she's no longer just our little girl," I confessed, the words heavy with emotion. Sarah squeezed my hand. "She's growing up, Sam. We can't protect her forever. She needs to live her life, make her own choices." I knew she was right, but the father in me couldn't help but worry. The next day, while Sarah and Emily were out shopping, I sat with Ethan in the living room. "So, Ethan, what are your plans after the exchange program?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Ethan looked at me, his eyes earnest. "I'm hoping to pursue a career in diplomacy, Mr. Roberts. And well, Emily and I have been talking about our future together." The words hit me like a freight train. Our future together. The possibility of Emily moving away, starting a life with someone else, was suddenly very real. "Ethan, I just want what's best for Emily. She's my little girl, and I need to know she'll be taken care of," I said, the words laced with a father's concern. Ethan nodded. "I understand, Mr. Roberts. I care deeply for Emily. I promise to always look out for her and support her in whatever she chooses to do." His words were reassuring, but a part of me still grappled with the reality of letting go. As the days passed, Emily and Ethan's visit seemed to blur into a series of meals, conversations, and laughter. I watched them together, their easy camaraderie and obvious affection for each other, and felt a pang of something akin to loss, mixed with a begrudging acceptance. One afternoon, as I was tidying up in the garage, I overheard a conversation between Emily and Sarah in the kitchen. Their voices were hushed, but the snippets I caught were enough to send a jolt of alarm through me. "Not sure how Dad will take it." Emily's voice trailed off. "Sam will understand, honey. He just wants you to be happy," Sarah replied, her tone gentle yet firm. Curiosity and concern got the better of me, and I found myself edging closer to the kitchen door, straining to hear more. "It's just, Ethan and I have been talking about moving in together." In Paris, Emily confessed, her voice tinged with excitement and apprehension. The words hit me like a tidal wave. Moving in together. In Paris. The thought of Emily, so far away, building a life with someone I barely knew, was overwhelming. "Emily, are you sure about this?" "It's a big step," Sarah's voice was cautious. "I'm sure, Mom. I love Ethan, and I love Paris. It feels right," Emily replied, her conviction clear in her voice. I stepped back, the weight of her words sinking in. My little girl, my Emily, was no longer a child. She was making choices, big, life-altering choices, and I had to come to terms with it. That evening, during dinner, Emily brought up the topic. "Dad, Mom, Ethan, and I wanted to talk to you about something," she began, her eyes seeking mine. I braced myself, knowing what was coming. "We're listening, Emily," I said, my voice steady. Emily took a deep breath. "Ethan and I have decided to move in together. In Paris." The room fell silent. Sarah reached for my hand under the table, giving it a reassuring squeeze. I looked at Emily, then at Ethan, and saw the hope and love in their eyes. "Paris is a long way away, Emily. Are you sure about this?" I managed to ask, my voice betraying my concern. "Yes, Dad. I'm sure. I love Ethan, and I love Paris. It's where I want to be," Emily replied, her voice firm yet gentle. I looked at Sarah, seeking her support. She nodded, giving me a look that said, "We need to let her go, Sam." I turned back to Emily and Ethan. "If this is what you both want, then you have our support. Just promise me you'll be careful and that you'll keep in touch." Emily's face lit up with a smile that reminded me of the little girl who used to hold my hand and look up at me with absolute trust. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Mom. We promise." The rest of the evening was a blur of conversation and plans. But as I lay in bed that night, A myriad of thoughts raced through my mind. Emily was starting a new chapter of her life, one that I would be a part of from a distance. It was a bittersweet realization, but one I had to accept. As the days of Emily and Ethan's visit dwindled, I found myself coming to terms with the inevitable. My role as a father was changing from protector and guide to supporter and advisor. I watched Emily, her face aglow with happiness and excitement for the future, and knew that this was just the beginning of her journey. The morning of their departure arrived all too soon. The house was filled with the sound of suitcases being zipped and last-minute checks. Sarah was busy in the kitchen, preparing a quick breakfast, while I helped Ethan load their luggage into the car. "Take care of her, Ethan," I said, my voice low, as we stood by the car. "I will, Mr. Roberts." "I promise," Ethan replied, his gaze sincere. I nodded, the lump in my throat making it hard to speak. As I turned to go back inside, Ethan called out, "Thank you for everything." Back in the house, Emily was waiting, her eyes bright yet moist with unshed tears. "Dad, I'm going to miss you." I pulled her into a tight hug, holding on for a moment longer than usual. "I'll miss you too, kiddo, but I'm proud of you. Remember that." We said our goodbyes, Sarah and I standing at the doorstep, waving as the car pulled away. Watching it disappear down the street, I felt a sense of loss, but also a deep-seated pride and love for the young woman Emily had become. As Sarah and I walked back into the now quiet house, she slipped her hand into mine. "She'll be okay, Sam. We raised a strong, smart daughter." I nodded, the reality of Emily's absence settling in. "Yeah, she'll be okay. And so will we." That night, as I lay in bed, the house enveloped in silence, I realized that this was a new chapter for Sarah and me as well. A chapter where we would learn to navigate our lives without Emily's constant presence, where we would watch from afar as she built her own life, her own story. And so, amidst the turmoil and discovery, I found myself standing at the threshold of a new reality, one where letting go was just as important as holding on. Emily's journey was her own now, and all I could do was watch, support, and love her from a distance. In the weeks following Emily's departure with Ethan, a strange unease settled over our household. Sarah seemed to be in constant contact with Emily, their conversations filled with laughter and secrets I wasn't privy to. I, Samuel, found myself in a state of limbo, caught between missing my daughter and grappling with the changes her departure had brought. One crisp autumn evening, as I sat on the porch lost in thought, Sarah came outside, her phone in hand and a troubled look on her face. "Sam, we need to talk about Emily." I tensed, sensing something was amiss. "What's wrong? Is Emily okay?" "She's fine, but—" Sarah paused, taking a deep breath. "She and Ethan had a fight. A big one. She's thinking of coming back home." The news hit me like a ton of bricks. Coming back? But she was so happy with Ethan. "What happened?" Sarah sighed, sitting down beside me. "It's complicated, Sam. They've been having issues, and it all just came to a head." As we talked, I felt a mixture of relief and worry. Relief that Emily might be coming home, but worry about what had transpired between her and Ethan. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and reassurances as we tried to piece together what had happened. Finally, one afternoon, Emily called. "Dad, Mom, I need to come home. I can't stay here anymore." "Of course, sweetheart. You can come home anytime," I said, my heart aching at the pain in her voice. "Thank you, Dad. I'll explain everything when I get there," she replied before ending the call. The day Emily returned, the house was filled with a tense anticipation. Sarah and I waited at the airport, and when Emily emerged through the arrivals gate, my heart sank. She looked tired and worn, a stark contrast to the vibrant girl who had left for Paris. The ride home was quiet, Emily staring out the window, lost in her thoughts. Once home, we sat down in the living room, the air thick with unspoken questions. "Emily, what happened?" Sarah finally asked, her voice gentle. Emily took a deep breath, her eyes welling up with tears. "Ethan and we had different expectations. I thought we were on the same page about our future, but we weren't. He didn't want the same things I did." I listened, a knot forming in my stomach. My little girl, heartbroken and disillusioned, was a sight I couldn't bear. "Sweetheart, you don't have to go through this alone. We're here for you," I said, reaching out to hold her hand. Emily nodded, squeezing my hand in return. "I know, Dad. It's hard. I thought Ethan was the one, but I guess I was wrong." The following days were a mixture of comforting Emily and trying to give her space. Sarah was a pillar of strength, her motherly instincts kicking in full force. As for me, I struggled with a range of emotions, relief at having Emily home, anger at Ethan for hurting her, and sadness at seeing her so upset. One evening, as we sat in the living room, Emily's phone rang. She looked at it and then at us, her expression unreadable. "It's Ethan. He wants to talk. Do you want to take it?" Sarah asked, her voice cautious. Emily hesitated, then nodded. "I need to. I have to know why he did what he did." We gave her privacy, stepping out onto the porch. The night air was cool and crisp, a stark contrast to the warmth of the house. As Sarah and I sat in silence, I couldn't help but feel a surge of protectiveness. My daughter, whom I had watched grow up, make mistakes, and learn from them, was facing a new kind of heartache, one that I couldn't shield her from. After what seemed like an eternity, Emily joined us on the porch, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes held a certain resolve. I spoke to Ethan. He apologized, said he was confused about his feelings and what he wanted in life. He thought he was ready for a commitment, but he wasn't. Sarah reached out, pulling Emily into a hug. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry you had to go through this." I felt a twinge of anger towards Ethan but kept my emotions in check. "Emily, you're strong, and you'll get through this. We're here for you, every step of the way." Emily nodded, wiping away her tears. "I know, Dad. It's just hard. I thought we had something special, but I guess it's better to find out now than later." The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. Emily oscillated between moments of clarity and bouts of sadness. Sarah and I did our best to support her, offering a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on. One afternoon, as I was working in my study, Emily knocked on the door. "Dad, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course, Emily." "Come in," I said, motioning for her to sit. She sat down, her hands nervously twisting in her lap. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened, and I realized something. I need to find out who I am on my own without being defined by someone else." Her words struck a chord in me. "Emily, that's a very mature realization. Finding yourself is a journey, and it's one you have to take on your own." "I know, Dad. And I think I want to go back to Paris. Not for Ethan, but for me. To continue my studies and to explore who I am as an individual," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. The thought of her going back so soon after everything that had happened filled me with concern. "Are you sure, Emily? It's a big decision." "I'm sure, Dad. I need to do this for myself. I promise I'll be careful and stay in touch," she assured me, her eyes seeking my approval. I looked at her, seeing not the little girl who used to climb into my lap with her picture books, but a young woman ready to face the world head-on. "If that's what you want, Emily, then I support you. Just promise me you'll be safe." "I promise, Dad," she said, a small smile breaking through her tears. As Emily prepared for her return to Paris, Sarah and I watched with a mix of pride and apprehension. Our little girl was spreading her wings, ready to fly on her own. The day of her departure, we stood at the airport, saying our goodbyes. I hugged her tightly, whispering words of encouragement and love. "You've got this, Emily. You're stronger than you know." "Thanks, Dad. I love you," she said, holding on to me for a moment longer. As her plane took off, Sarah and I stood watching, hand in hand, a silent promise between us to always be there for Emily, no matter where her journey took her. And so, amidst the confrontation and confession, we faced a new reality, one where our roles as parents were evolving, where letting go was as important as holding on, and where our love for Emily would be the guiding light in her journey of self-discovery. The days following Emily's departure for Paris again were heavy with a sense of quiet reflection in our home. The air was filled with an unspoken mixture of worry, pride, and a deep-seated sense of change. As a father, I, Samuel, grappled with the myriad emotions that came with watching your child step boldly into her own life, carving a path that was hers and hers alone. Sarah seemed more contemplative during these days, often gazing out the window with a thoughtful expression. One evening, as we sat in the living room, she broke the silence. "Sam, do you ever think about how quickly time has passed? How our little girl is now out there, making her own way?" I nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. "Every day, Sarah. It feels like just yesterday when I was teaching her to ride a bike, and now she's halfway across the world." We fell into a comfortable silence, each lost in our own thoughts. My mind wandered back to the early days of Emily's life, the sleepless nights, the first steps, the school plays. Each memory was a reminder of how fleeting those moments were and how precious. A few days later, I received a call from Emily. Her voice was bright and filled with excitement. "Dad, I've enrolled in some art history classes here. Paris is so inspiring. Hearing the enthusiasm in her voice brought a smile to my face. That's great, Emily. I'm glad you're finding things that you love. Yeah, and I've been exploring the city, visiting museums, and meeting new people. It's been amazing, she said, her happiness evident in her voice. I felt a swell of pride, knowing that despite the challenges she faced, she was thriving, embracing the experiences that life offered. Just remember to be careful, okay? And call us if you need anything. I will, Dad. I promise, she replied before we ended the call. That night, Sarah and I lay in bed, talking about Emily's latest adventures. She sounds happy, Sam. I think we did something right, Sarah said with a chuckle. I guess we did. It's just hard letting go, you know. I replied, the words tinged with a mix of emotions. But that's part of being a parent, Sam. Letting them go so they can grow, Sarah said, her hand finding mine under the covers. The following weeks were a period of adjustment for Sarah and me. We found ourselves rediscovering our own interests and hobbies, things that had taken a backseat during the busy years of raising children. I spent more time in my woodworking shop, working on projects that I had long put off. One Saturday afternoon, as I was sanding down a piece of oak for a new bookshelf, Sarah came into the shop. Sam, I've been thinking, maybe we should take that trip to Europe we always talked about. Visit Emily in Paris, see some sights. The idea caught me off guard, but the more I thought about it, the more appealing it became. You know what, Sarah? That sounds like a great idea. Let's do it. Let's go to Paris. As we started planning our trip, the excitement began to build. It felt like a new adventure, one that was ours to share. The prospect of seeing Emily in her new life, in the city she loved, was something I looked forward to with anticipation. The day we left for Paris, I felt a sense of adventure that I hadn't felt in years. Sarah and I navigated the airport with a sense of purpose, our destination calling to us. The flight was long, but the thought of seeing Emily kept my spirits high. When we finally arrived in Paris, Emily was waiting for us at the airport, her face alight with joy. Mom, Dad, welcome to Paris, she exclaimed, hugging us tightly. The days that followed were a blur of sightseeing, cafe visits, and long walks along the Seine. Seeing Paris through Emily's eyes was an experience unto itself. She showed us her favorite spots, the quaint little cafes she frequented, the art galleries that inspired her, and the historical landmarks that dotted the city. One evening, as we sat at a small outdoor cafe, watching the people pass by, Emily shared her experiences and dreams. I've been thinking a lot about what I want to do with my life. Paris has opened my eyes to so many possibilities. Sarah and I listened, our hearts full. We're proud of you, Emily. You've come so far, Sarah said, her voice filled with emotion. And no matter what you decide to do, we'll always be here for you, I added, feeling a sense of peace and resolution. As our trip came to an end, I realized that this journey was not just about visiting Emily. It was about finding a new understanding and appreciation for the life she was building for herself. It was about coming to terms with the changes that time brings and embracing them with open arms. On our last night in Paris, we took a boat ride along the Seine, the city lights reflecting off the water. Emily leaned against the railing, looking out at the city she had come to love. Thank you for coming, Mom and Dad. It means the world to me. Sarah hugged her tightly. We wouldn't miss it for anything. As I watched the two most important women in my life, a sense of contentment washed over me. Yes, life was changing, but it was also opening new doors, offering new experiences and opportunities to grow. The flight back home was a time for reflection. Sarah and I talked about our own plans, the things we wanted to do together, the adventures we still wanted to have. We talked about Emily and how proud we were of her. As we landed back home, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and excitement for the future. The journey of parenthood had brought its share of challenges and joys, and as this chapter came to a close, I knew that there were still many more to come. And so, amidst the reflection and resolution, Sarah and I stepped into a new phase of our lives, one filled with hope, love, and the unbreakable bond of family that would always keep us connected, no matter where our individual journeys took us. The return from Paris marked a new beginning for Sarah and me. The house, once echoing with the sounds of a bustling family, was now quieter, its spaces filled with memories and echoes of laughter. As I stood in Emily's now vacant room, a sense of both melancholy and pride washed over me. She was out there, in the world, making her own way. It was a bittersweet realization for any parent. One crisp morning, as Sarah and I sat sipping coffee in the kitchen, she looked at me with a thoughtful expression. Sam, have you thought about what we're going to do now? It's just us again, after all these years. I put down my cup, considering her words. You know, I've been thinking about that. Maybe it's time we start doing those things we always talked about. You know, the hobbies we set aside, the trips we wanted to take. Sarah smiled, her eyes lighting up. I like that idea. Maybe I can finally start that garden I've always wanted. And you could spend more time in your workshop. The conversation sparked a newfound energy in us. We began planning, not just for the physical changes in our home, but for the new adventures we could embark upon together. It felt like a second honeymoon phase, exploring interests we had put on hold for parenthood. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself more involved in my woodworking projects, taking on more complex and creative designs. Sarah began her garden project, her enthusiasm infectious as she talked about her plans for a flower bed and vegetable patch. One afternoon, as I was working on a new bookshelf in my workshop, my phone rang. It was Emily, her voice bright and cheerful. Hey, Dad. I just wanted to check in and tell you about my new art history class. It's fascinating. Hearing her voice, full of excitement and passion, filled me with joy. That's great to hear, Em. Your mom and I have been keeping busy too. She started on her garden, and I'm knee-deep in sawdust most days. Emily laughed. That sounds just like you too. I'm glad you're doing things you love. As we talked, I realized that this was what moving forward looked like. It wasn't about forgetting the past, but about embracing the present and looking forward to the future. The months passed, and Sarah's garden flourished, becoming a vibrant tapestry of colors and fragrances. My workshop became my haven, a place where I could create and reflect. We sent pictures and updates to Emily, who shared her own experiences and adventures in Paris. One evening, Sarah and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset. Sam, do you ever think about what Emily's future might look like? What if she decides to stay in Paris permanently? The question hung in the air, a reminder of the ever-changing nature of life. I do think about it. But wherever she decides to make her home, I know she'll be fine. She's strong and smart, just like her mother. Sarah smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. She is, isn't she? I just hope she knows that we'll always be here for her, no matter where she is. I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her close. She knows, Sarah. We've raised a wonderful daughter. And now, it's our time. To explore, to rediscover, and to enjoy the life we've built together. As the sky turned from hues of orange to dusky purple, I felt a sense of contentment and excitement for what lay ahead. Life was moving forward, and so were we. With each new day came the promise of new experiences, challenges, and joys. And so, in this chapter of moving forward, Sarah and I stepped into a future that was ours to shape and enjoy. We embraced the quiet moments, the new hobbies, and the plans for future travels. We learned to appreciate the here and now, cherishing the memories of what was and anticipating the joys of what was yet to come. Our conversations often drifted to Emily, her latest updates a constant source of pride and joy. We talked about visiting her again, perhaps exploring more of Europe together. The possibilities seemed endless. As autumn gave way to winter, Sarah's garden lay dormant, but her plans for the next season were already taking shape. My workshop was busier than ever, with projects lined up that kept me engaged and fulfilled. During the holiday season, we received a call from Emily. She was coming home for a visit. The news brought an excitement that filled the house with a renewed energy. Sarah busied herself with preparations, baking, and decorating, while I finished up a special project, a handcrafted picture frame for Emily featuring intricate designs and a personal touch. The day Emily arrived, the house felt complete again. Her stories, laughter, and presence filled every room with warmth and life. We exchanged gifts and stories, enjoying the precious time together. Mom, Dad, I've been thinking about what I want to do after my program ends. I'm considering staying in Paris for a few more years, Emily shared one evening, her eyes reflecting a mix of uncertainty and hope. Sarah and I exchanged glances. Emily, whatever you decide, we support you. You have a whole world to explore and experience, I said, my voice filled with encouragement. Yeah, just know that home is always here, whenever you need it, Sarah added, her hand reaching out to hold Emily's. As we sat there, talking about the future, I realized that moving forward was not just about accepting change, but also about embracing the growth that comes with it. Emily's journey was her own, but it was also a part of our story, a chapter in the book of our family's life. And so, as the chapter of moving forward unfolded, it was filled with the ebb and flow of life's changes, the joys of personal growth, and the enduring strength of family bonds. Sarah and I looked forward to the days ahead, knowing that whatever they held, we would face them together, with love, support, and a sense of adventure.